So first of all, like, give us a little background. Actually, last episode, you gave us a little bit of how you came to Christ. But maybe you can share some of what happened there and then bring us into the college experience. What did God do in your life in college? So it's from when you came to Christ to your college experience. Give us a little bit of that.
Well, thank you, Paul. I'm looking forward to interviewing you, bro, in our next episode, but I get to share some things about my life this time, so I'm honored to do so. I grew up in Dallas and went to a big church, big denominational church there, and of course thought I was a Christian. I was baptized and catechized, and I don't know what all the I's I did, but I had a theology that when things were going well, God must be with me. When things weren't going well, God must not be with me. And so in order to reward God, when I was a senior in high school, I joined the church and was baptized, but still no one had shared the gospel with me. I guess the spare tire theology or whatever I had did not serve me too well because I was still lost as could be. And it wasn't really until an Athletes in Action staff member befriended me and took me out to the airport one day to teach me how to share my faith. And he went first. I was so scared. What in the world am I doing here, And now it's my turn. And so I found the safest, person I could find in that airport. It was a 15-year-old kid sitting by himself, but it was total disaster. It was just a total debacle. And at the end of that time, I just was so flustered, so frustrated that I finally confessed to my friend that I think you have something I don't have. And it was a humbling thing to do, Paul, but to admit that I was a very prideful person that thought I was a Christian, but I was not. And so it was that afternoon, spring of my senior year, that I bowed my head to receive Christ. And like I shared last time, I got to lead another player, a younger player, to Christ the very next day.
That's awesome.
I asked him the golden question: would you like to receive Christ into your life? And he stopped and he looked at me, he goes, "But I'm Jewish." Well, I didn't know what to say. I had not had any seminary courses or apologetics or anything, and so I just said, "That's okay." And he prayed to receive Christ, and he really did. I mean, he really awesome. Did. And years later, although I knew nothing about follow-up at the time, he really did start growing and married a Christian girl and got involved with the church. And so anyway, that was a God thing for me. But so I went off to college. I had a little bit of discipling already from my friend. His name was Alan, and some evangelism training and quiet time and some things that he had built into my life. So really, I went to the University of Arkansas really as a missionary. I was dedicated really from day one, and I wasn't planning on joining a fraternity, but within 30 days was moving into one. Wow. I was planning on playing college football, but I realized I wasn't good enough. So I said, well, maybe I can become an intramural god. And so
it's hard to believe. I mean, this video, what you see, these shoulders.
Yeah, it's just massive, isn't it? Yeah.
Impressive.
I was like 145 pounds, 5'8" or something, 145. So I've hit my maturity here in my latter years.
You had the spin move on flag football down to a science, though.
Yeah, I could throw the ball, but I was slow as molasses. So we had a passing offense, but anyway, I lived in this fraternity house for 3 years, and same room. And it was the 3 greatest years of my spiritual life in terms of my growth. So many guys will come into these different living groups, and girls too, I'm sure, that have some sort of Christian background. They were raised in church, and they were involved in FCA like I was, or some other ministry or Young Life or something. But once they hit college, especially if they get in one of these social groups, I mean, within 30 days, they fade right into the woodwork. And so there's this compromise, there's this peer pressure that's unbelievable. And by God's grace, he used that to cause me to grow. It forced me to my knees on a daily basis to go to him. And we lived, this fraternity house was, near an area of the campus that almost every night, about 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, I just felt so beat up some days, Paul. I just felt so beat up by these guys that I loved them, I served them, but man, the things that they did and said to me and other Christians in the house that were coming to Christ, I just had to get out and pour my heart out before God. It was a nightly just pouring it out before the Lord. But it was true spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And something God does in our life when we really are engaged in spiritual warfare, he really does cause spiritual growth to take place. He causes spiritual dependence. The battle is delicious. You can taste some of what Jesus experienced. I was sharing this with my daughter the other night as we had dinner. I was talking about the Apostle Paul's life verse in Philippians 3:10, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, but then the fellowship of his sufferings, that I may be conformed unto his death. And so there are a few times in my life that I have really experienced the fellowship of his sufferings, and it really did conform me. Really did a lot of conforming and transforming of my life. And those 3 years in that house, it really was. So really at the end of that time, and I moved out my senior year with a guy who was discipling me that I mentioned last episode and in our book called Vic. I moved in with him, and he really continued to develop me and disciple me. But by the time I got through with college, I wanted to continue to work with students. I even stuck around for 2 years after college. My dad was not too thrilled to continue to develop these guys. I did not want to leave the University of Arkansas until I had reproduced myself at least one time. I had led at least one man to Christ, followed him up, discipled him to the point where now he had led someone to Christ and discipled them. And so I just wasn't going to leave. My dad, again, was not too thrilled. Steve, what are you doing? But I stuck around to see that through. I'm so glad I did, Paul. I'm so glad I did.